Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us again. Last week, the company released news that we were going to be working with a partner in China to make hydrogen in China. So, Justyn, first question, why is NeuRizer doing this deal in China to make hydrogen with them?
Thanks for the question, Tony. It's a complex answer, and I could spend a fair bit of time explaining how the hydrogen market in Australia works and how it doesn't work. But for us as a company, it's been a conundrum. And the reason for that is we have this great position where we can make more hydrogen than anyone else in Australia. We can make it cheaper than anyone else in Australia. We've proved that through the demonstration facility. If our gasifiers are not working properly, we can even make more hydrogen. That's the fantastic thing here, is that we can make more hydrogen by not operating to the best of our ability. Our issue was we could make so much hydrogen and we could not see a market for it in Australia. And the reason for that was, if you look at the Australian market with hydrogen at the moment, it's really quite a strange play. You have WA trying to be the first mover. You have South Australia trying to be the first mover. Queensland, Tasmania, even that numpty state Victoria is trying to be a first mover in the hydrogen game, right? If any of those succeed, they've already actually outstripped the demand for hydrogen in Australia, any one of them, not any 5 of them. So we sat back and we're going, all right, hydrogen in Australia is not going to work from a commercial point of view. It will work if you want government grants. It will work if you have an investor who's ESG focused rather than profitability and simply wants to put their money into a hydrogen play. It will work. Right. But ultimately, you can't make money as a company from it. So we had a look at the process. We looked at what we could make, and we signed an agreement in China 3 years ago. And that agreement was signed in December 2020. And within 3 months of us signing that agreement, China locked down with COVID. You couldn't travel within China, you couldn't travel to China, and we couldn't advance the agreement we'd made with CNE up in China. During that time, we were lucky in that Meijin, who are the largest hydrogen company in China, in the largest hydrogen economy in the world, had moved their position from simply being someone who had a great idea about hydrogen, investing money into the hydrogen process, to starting and running the largest hydrogen manufacturer of buses in China, service stations in China with hydrogen capability and capacity, and now running a hydrogen trading arm so that they could trade hydrogen on a stock exchange, basically. So during the period where we couldn't do anything, they were moving ahead fairly quickly. When the market opened up again and we could actually travel back into China, and internally, more importantly, they could travel, we started to progress this hydrogen strategy. So we were sitting here in Australia watching everyone else talk about hydrogen, how they're going to make money out of hydrogen. We couldn't see that. But what we could see, and there's a fundamental reason why the China market is so important to us, and that is, if you make hydrogen in Australia and everybody succeeds and makes hydrogen, there's so much hydrogen, you have to export it. It's no different than the coal seam gas industry in Queensland, where they made so much coal seam gas that they needed to set up LNG ports in Gladstone to export that gas because it exceeded the Australian capacity. The hydrogen market right now is in exactly the same play, and that is that if everyone makes the hydrogen they say they're going to make, they have to be able to export it. And here's your fundamental problem. Nobody anywhere in the world is successfully exporting hydrogen at the moment. There have been some trials. There's a well-known one in Victoria where it has successfully transported hydrogen, but at an incredibly expensive rate. So as it is, as of today, no one has successfully exported hydrogen. So we're sitting back and going, all right, we can make lots of hydrogen here. The obvious answer is, can we make hydrogen there? And that is, can we make it where the market is? Not can we make it here and export it to the market? So we had a look at it. Meijin had set up service stations, that had set up a infrastructure process where you could move hydrogen around to those service stations and refilling stations. They had buses that were running on their hydrogen that they owned, and they'd set up the trading platform. So it became very clear to us that the obvious answer here was, if we can make hydrogen on the volumes we say, and we know we can, if we can make it as cheap as we can, then here's our natural market, right, at the end user stage. So we sat down with Meijin in the last couple of weeks. We worked through the process with them. And what we expect to do is actually be able to work on a few of their leases. Now, they have multiple coal leases in China. They also make urea and fertilizer. They also have steel mills. You know, we're talking about a very serious company, but the largest integrated hydrogen company in China. So that's why we signed the agreement with them, because we had an end user, as opposed to having to resolve, which, by the way, no one else can at the moment, transporting hydrogen. That's why we did that deal with them now.
And so we're effectively, what you're saying is, we're not taking our product to their market. We're taking our expertise to their market and making the product where it's needed and where there's a mature existing market. So can you tell us a little bit more about our IP and how that's going to operate in China, and how we're going to protect that intellectual property and retain the value in that?
Look, it's a good question, Tony. Protecting intellectual property in China is a problem that Shell have had. That if you look at the big French companies that put in the rail system and the high-speed rail, a lot of very big, sophisticated companies have had problems protecting their IP in China. One of our advantages is we're doing this deal with Shaanxi Meijin, right, who already have a connection with us as a shareholder. So they have an incentive to actually protect our IP up in China. So our IP consists of know-how, which you can license. It consists of patents, and it consists of IP we're still registering. How do we protect it? What we've done is, and we were questioned by several people about this, I might add, in that, are we simply selling ourselves for $50 million to the Chinese and saying, you're going to pay $25 million per site, and therefore you can just roll it out over the whole of China? I think it's unlikely because of our relationship with Shaanxi Meijin. But I also have to be very honest here and say that, look, you know what, if someone's giving us $50 million US for 2 sites, and we're going to end in a battle in 10 years or 5 years' time because I've rolled it out and haven't paid more, that's a nice problem to have. You know, we've got the 50 million from them. They're our partner. We're growing in China. And I think it's unlikely, but you can't be naive either, Tony. I mean, if companies like Shell and Sasol have had problems here, Maglev, another one, the rail line, you've got to be naive to think that you are so clever or sophisticated you can't stop that from happening.
Fair enough. Let's move on to timing. You know, really excited by this opportunity, but when's it likely to start? When will our shareholders likely see more evidence that we're actively involved in assessing those sites and progressing with those projects to make the hydrogen in China?
The reason I smile over this question, Tony, is because of our last one we just did, right, where I had to apologise to our shareholders over being too optimistic. And had to be very careful. And I smile because, you know, you could fall into the same trap again.
Yes, indeed.
So the assessment process of a site is complex. And what I mean, and it's not an excuse for 2 years or 3 years of progress. That's rubbish. You can do it in much shorter time than that. But you've got to understand fully the roof structure, the floor structure, the thickness of the coal, the quality of the coal, and the aquifers in the area. Now, because they're a coal company, they've already drilled. So they already know the depth the coal is at, right? They already know that. They already know the quality of the coal. So you've got 2 quick answers there for us straight away. However, they would never look at the roof structure, right? Because it was not important to them. It was too deep for them to go open cut. The quality of the coal was thermal coal, so they weren't going to go longwall or underground mining. So the roof structure was never assessed properly by them, whereas it's something we have to look at very carefully. Equally, we have to do seismic. And the reason we need to do seismic is we need to know exactly when we're drilling, when we're going to hit coal. And I'm not talking about meters, I'm talking about feet and inches. We need to know exactly. So we're going to have to shoot 3D. They've got 2D seismic, which makes it easier for us to actually understand the 3D. But what it means is we've got to shoot that. We've got to get a 3D company there that will do it. We have to have that interpreted, and then we have to look at it. What does that mean from a timeline point of view? It is not simply just looking at the coal and going, yes, that's fine. We need to understand it properly. But from a timeline, I think realistically, the earliest we could get all that information on ground would be 6 months. I think we'd be hoping between 6 and 8, but when your timeline is relying on someone else, you run into issues. So, for instance, how long it takes the 3D guys to get on site and shoot it is out of our control. How long it takes to interpret that once it's shot is outside of our control. But we're still pretty comfortable that we're going to get that done, by the end of this year, 2023, which means then if we're going for a hydrogen play, we're in 2024. Because the infrastructure and the capex for a hydrogen play is much lower than anything else we've ever done. And what I mean by that is you simply have to gasify the coal and then strip the hydrogen out of that stream of gas. So you have a synthetic gas, all of us would know that, which consists of hydrogen, nitrogen, CH4, which is methane, CO and CO2. You're simply stripping one of those gas streams, which is hydrogen, out, and you have it. So it's an easy, low capex process. You then have to transport it for storage, but if you're doing it where your market is, that's not a problem. So we can transport it within 20, 30 Ks, and that's not an issue. It can be compressed and tanked and stored and then transferred through their current system. So from a capex point of view, it's low. From a complexity point of view, it's very low. And from an approval process, it's very low. Now, what a lot of people do need to understand is that the National Reform and Development Commission in China has already approved ISG, UCG it's called up there, as an energy arm, and hydrogen as one of their major legs that are coming through in the next 5 to 10 years in their 14th plan. So you already have the federal government through the NRDC. Federal is not the right word for China, but it's the equivalent of federal government. You already have the NRDC and each of those states actually signing up to this process. So, from a timing point of view, we don't believe that it's going to take us more than 3 to 4 months to get the approvals we need to get on site. And then we think we can get the rest of it done that 6 to 8 month period. But yes, I will caveat, Tony, in that I don't want to be shot for 10 months.
We don't want to be held to that. It's still early days, but it's great that this has been initiated and we've now put some meat to the bones of that joint venture agreement that we announced last year. It's progressing well. One of the things that the shareholders have been asking me about is why are you doing this in the midst? You haven't even got the project in Australia happening. Is this a distraction to management and board? And I've given my answer, but I'd like you to give an answer.
I think you're going to get two. I think you'll get two criticisms, and one will be a distraction, one will be a diversion. Right. So I'll deal with the diversion one. That's the easy one, just to get away straight away. Or some people will say, "Oh, you just announced this because you're diverting the fact that you haven't finished with your strategic partner." So it's a diversion to take the interest away and make life easy for us because we haven't completed on the strategic partner. Nothing further from the truth. We signed this with CNE, as I said, 3 years ago, way before we started talking to the strategic partner. It's just that it timed with the fact that China only opened up a few months ago. And I was only up there, a month ago, and we're able to progress this. That was a timing thing that has happened during it. I think from a distraction point of view, the bigger question there is that, and we have this problem, and all shareholders should understand the problem we have here too, in that I get told, you don't want more than one project at a time because you get distracted and you can't concentrate on it. I then sit in front of another fund manager who'll say to me, if you're a one project company and it falls over, you're finished. Right. So you have to balance those two views. So you want plan B and you want plan C in case there's a problem with plan A, which there isn't, but you still need plan B and C. Equally, as soon as you do that, people say you're spreading yourself too thin, you're distracted. Okay. We're lucky with the China deal in that one of our board members is a petroleum engineer, right, and knows this process backwards and gasification backwards. The company he works with in China is one that, as I said, does steel mills, does coal mining, does thermal coal, does ammonia, does urea. and hydrogen. Right, so the company he's with is already fully involved in this. So from our point of view, there's very little work we have to put in other than assessing the site, engaging the seismic company that's going to do it, and then interpreting the data, which they will do anyway, and provide it to us. So certainly in the short term, there's very little work we have to do as a company to fulfill our agreement with them. Then, if we have to then step up to start doing the work, drilling is fine. Company does it themselves. So we already have our partner there that does that. That's not going to take a lot of work from us. As soon as we do the drilling and finish and start switching through to actual operational capacity, it's true we have to gear up. We have to get more people on the ground. But one of the things we're very lucky about is that China has no shortage of petroleum engineers and geos. There's no shortage up there. Equally, there are quite a few people that we know personally around the world that can move into this area very quickly. None of that detracts from our project at Lee Creek. None of that takes away from our capacity. None of it takes away from our ability to be able to perform there. So in the short term, it's very little impact on us from a personnel, timing, money point of view. Once we get to the point where it's going to cost us money, they've already got to pay the money. Right, so it's not going to be a financial burden on us. We're actually going to get paid and then be able to use that to get moving up there. And the announcement, we made it very clear that the demonstration facility, or stage one, was funded by them, not by us.
Yeah,
so from a diversion point of view, it's rubbish. Right, from a distraction point of view, it's rubbish. But I can still understand the question and appreciate the question that needs to be responded to properly.
And I think one of the things we need to emphasise is just how committed Meijin Energy, or MEI, are to the partnership. They're the ones that are driving this, and they're the ones that are going to provide the initial funding to get the demonstration or the approvals. Can you explain, Justyn, how any joint venture or equity share in the projects might work, just hypothetically?
Look, it's interesting. I've been working with, oddly enough, Shaanxi Meijin since 2008. Right, not in our capacity at NeuRizer, but certainly in China, I've been working with them and their team since 2008. They've always been focused on gas. They've always been focused on steel and urea and ammonia. But it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that they have moved into this hydrogen play. And initially, when they started, they didn't know where it was going to take them. And what I mean by that is they could see it. So they had the idea and the view that China was going to move down this path. They could see the opportunity, but did not know where it was going to take them. And as I said earlier, it developed very, very quickly for them that it's actually growing that quickly that they now need more hydrogen. Now, they currently get their hydrogen from the steel mill. It's a byproduct from their steel process. But they need the ability to be able to get their hands on an awful lot more hydrogen. What does that mean from a JV percentage point of view? It's hard to say. You would assume that, firstly, if you look at the demo, we're saying they're going to pay for that demo. We're going to do it. They'll pay for it. And then we're going to go to a pro rata funding of any project in China. So I would assume we haven't negotiated it yet, but I would assume because it's in China, it's automatically going to require them to be a majority shareholder in that project. Whether it's 60% or 51%, it doesn't matter. They will need to be the majority shareholder in that. And then you run into another issue. Although it's not that difficult if you're in a joint venture with a Chinese company, but repatriating money out of China is always very difficult. It's not too bad if the company's making good money, by the way, including your Chinese partner. It's not as hard if you're not an SOE, either a state-owned enterprise, and Shaanxi Meijin are not owned by the state. They're not owned by the government. So repatriating profits and that is not as hard. I would think from preliminary discussions, we'd be looking at 60-40, somewhere around there.
And that's a really good opportunity for us in the future. Can our board, our company see that this opportunity might be duplicated elsewhere other than China?
I think this agreement is really good because it sets a precedent. And what it does is it tells the rest of the people that are talking to us that if you want us to go to your country and you want us to joint venture with you, then our IP is worth this much money. Now, we've spent 150 million as a company, right? So on developing the demonstration plant, the IP that we're working on, some of the patents we've actually registered and going through, we spent a lot of money. What this deal does is give it a value, right? And it gives a value on a site of 25 million US. So it now sets a precedent where anyone else, and by the way, we would be talking to a minimum of 4 or 5 different countries at the moment that have come to us about doing it. And we have said for a while to several of those parties that we value our IP and really you have to pay for us to go up there in the first instance, right? We're not going to waste our money as a company and go off on, for want of a better word, wild goose chases. What this deal does is set a price value on our IP. You want us to come into a location and work with you on it? We want 25 million US on that site. We want you to pay for the demonstration facility. The need for the demonstration facility is not in all places, by the way. It's more of a regulatory process, but for some of them it will be required. You have to pay for it. Right? We now have that precedent where we can just point to this agreement and say, there it is. You want to do it?
And obviously, sorry.
No, you want to do it? Then here's the precedent. It makes our life a lot easier in that we've shown there's a value. We've shown what it is. It's been independently verified, by the way, by another major accounting group that have valued the IP. And I'm just a bit reticent to say who they are at the moment. But it's been independently, independently validated as the correct value for the IP for an individual license. That's what I love about it, is why can you simply point to the agreement now? You want to do something, then that's what you've got to do.
And obviously with the hydrogen economy in other countries becoming critically important to their energy mix, they know that we can produce hydrogen a lot cheaper than anyone else. And that's why we've got a great business plan with urea, by the way. But people are also wanting us to move there with hydrogen. Can I ask you about the hydrogen platform that is operating in China, and how might NeuRizer benefit from that? That's a question without notice, by the way.
It's only just been established, right? So
Yep.
It's only very recently been established. I'm talking in the last month. So it's not fully functional yet. It's in its very early infancy. But what it basically is, if you're producing hydrogen, you want to sell 30 tons of hydrogen, that they will buy it, and you've got to meet the buy and the sell orders, right? So you've got to be able to have the capacity to deliver, that tonnage. They've got to have the ability to be able to buy, and then that platform actually is the trading platform that does the deal. So, and we've got similar platforms around on carbon trading. We've got it similar in many locations. They simply put their order in, once accepted, and we meet that order, and we have to deliver, they have to pay. It's simply as simple as that. But it is in its infancy, I might add. And one of the questions that hasn't been resolved yet is your pricing differential between green, blue, and grey hydrogen. Right. So one of the major issues there is, if you look at the world's hydrogen, nearly all of it not nearly all of it, that's not true. 60% of it is created from fossil fuels. So 60% of all world hydrogen at the moment is grey hydrogen. Clearly, the market wants everyone to switch through to green hydrogen. The problem with that is that green hydrogen is so much more expensive than grey hydrogen. You're talking about a price differential of 3 and 4 times. Blue hydrogen sits in the middle, and blue hydrogen is simply made from fossil fuels, but you sequester the CO2. Right, so, and that hasn't been worked out in China. So you're paying a premium for green, but you're not being penalised for grey or blue. right? So if you can get yourself to a situation where you're going to fully sequester, then you'll be blue hydrogen and get a premium. Some countries do not care, by the way. They just want the hydrogen. More of your advanced companies, Japan does care. So, for instance, if I wanted to sell hydrogen in Japan, then I'd have to be producing either green or blue hydrogen, not grey hydrogen, which is really quite interesting because Kawasaki Heavy Industries were the major player in the Victorian one, which was brown coal to hydrogen, which is grey hydrogen. So we see an early mover in Meijin on the trading platform, running the trading platform with two other companies. I've seen this once before in the aviation industry, where people undervalue the early mover on the regulatory point, so that, in fact, if you get that regulatory approval from the Chinese government, you have a leg up. They have that. I think it will take them at least 1 to 2 years before that actually starts to really get moving. And what I mean by that is they start trading on it, they're starting to make money out of the trading. The rest of the market in China appreciates what the trading platform is. That takes a little bit of time to get going. But for it to be Meijin that's doing it, it's a great opportunity for us.
Indeed. I'm just scanning down my questions. I think I've covered all the questions I had. Is there anything else we need to update?
I think our directors up in China often, are seen as almost superfluous because they're in China, and we've pivoted away from the Chinese position. Certainly in the past, I think one of the things that's really important here is that doing business for an Australian company doing business in China, it's not that difficult. I think one of the great things for us is that it's Australian know-how being used in China, right? And I think that is a great tick for us. It's a great export for us. I think that we're going to, we're seeing the relationship thaw between Australia and China. I'm not sure how much it's going to thaw, by the way, but for us, it doesn't matter. We're going to China. We're doing something they want. We're doing something they need, and we're doing it with our Chinese partners. There is no issue. I got up to Beijing, as I said, weeks ago, and it was no different than where I was there 3 years ago. It's the same China, the same people, the same attitude, the same can-do attitude. Other than that, they're a little bit more cautious about the world political position in that and economy, but still the same China. So I was very keen for us to get back up there. I'm really happy with the fact that our two Chinese directors have worked so hard to get this across the line, and will keep working for us up there, which means we don't have to travel anywhere near as much when they're there. And it's been, I said, I really do want to thank both Jeff and Vincent for what they've done on this and where we're going to take this.
Very good. Look, obviously, we're capitalising on a market opportunity. Our shareholders would be very angry with us if they found out that we were offered this opportunity and we didn't take advantage of it. And we were offered it. We didn't go up there and say, what do you think about this idea? It was the other way around. Everything aligned well with what they're doing with buses and service stations and now the trading platform. And we're going to offer our expertise. They're going to pay us for it. And this is a great opportunity.
And it is. And Tony, they are close friends. They are shareholders. Like, they are not. We're dealing with, some left out of field Chinese company. We are dealing with a shareholder. We are dealing with the largest hydrogen player in China. We're dealing with the largest hydrogen economy in the world. And it's quite exciting. It is quite exciting.
And actually, you've reminded me of something that I've been saying to shareholders recently, but I said to shareholders when C&E came in as an investor. They did it for 3 reasons. 1, because they saw it as a good business opportunity and a good investment for them. That was 1. 2, they trusted us. And 3, they wanted access to our IP. And that third one is what's happening right now. Which you've explained early.
And they haven't sold a single share, so they're still there as a company. Their support has been amazing. And it's exciting. And it is exciting too, because, as I said earlier, they had no idea where hydrogen was taking them as a company when they started this process years ago. And it's just grown and grown and grown. And then the opportunity came for us where, hang on a minute, one of our shareholders is now the largest player in China, and we can produce the cheapest and most abundant hydrogen there is. How is there not a synergy there?
Yeah.
How is there not a synergy there?
Right. One thing we haven't mentioned in this interview and shareholders could go and have a look at it, but we can produce hydrogen for what cost? What do we do in the
$1 a kilo?
$1 a kilo. The government's stretch target, the Australian federal government stretch target is 2. I don't know what people are producing hydrogen for around the world now, but it wouldn't even be $2 yet.
No, I mean, you're getting variations in cost here. So if you go back and do your searches on it, you'll find internationally it's always quoted in US dollars. So always add, 50% onto it. So if it's 2 US, it's 3 Australian. You're getting variations in prices because they're not comparing apples with apples. They're just going on hydrogen prices. Some of them are green hydrogen, some of them are grey hydrogen. Generally speaking, you're finding that the cost to manufacture is between $2 and $5 to make hydrogen. The selling price is between sort of $5 and $10 US a kilo. Right, so you have Angus Taylor that came out and said he wanted to get the Australian price down to $1 a kilo. Sorry, $2 a kilo, I think was his stretch target. We're at 1.
It was. Yeah.
But who cares? Who cares? We can do it $1 a kilo, but who cares? Who are you selling it to? I had a bus company come to me in Australia and say, can we sell them hydrogen for their buses? They're going to try and convert their fleet to hydrogen. And it was like 50 kilos a month, right, for their first bus. And you sit there going, it's not worth the financial effort to put into that market. There's not enough of a market there. You've got a hydrogen hub that's not far from us at Lee Creek, the one they're trying to push into the top of the Spencer Gulf at Whyalla and Port Perry, Port Augusta. Equally, if they do a hydrogen power station, they're going to be doing that from renewables. We're going to produce hydrogen far, far, far cheaper than they will ever produce through the renewable process. But it's more of a political statement. It's more of a renewable statement. It's more of a progressive statement. But okay, they do that. We can produce hydrogen, I guarantee you 4 or 5 times cheaper than they will do, right, in this hydrogen hub. And yet we still cannot see how you make money here doing it. It just does not work. And I've always been very negative on the hydrogen story in Australia, right? But not so much in China because, as I said earlier, you want to be able to do your hydrogen where your market is, not have to do it and then transport it to your market.
And that opportunity will always be there for NeuRizer to make hydrogen in Australia when the market is there, when the economies of scale are there, and when we can justify it from a business, case point of view.
Oh, look,
that already exists.
If someone came to me and said they're going to pay us $5 a kilo for hydrogen for as much hydrogen as we can make, we wouldn't even do urea because the capex is so small and we're making 4 times of our money on that. But no one's going to do that in Australia, right? Yeah. The hydrogen market is so small that that's not going to happen. So our urea play, looking at going from ammonia to urea has always been the right move. It is still the right move. And we can, if we really had a market here, we could actually make hydrogen anyway on top of the hydrogen we use in the process.
Exactly.
To make more hydrogen to meet the market. All right. But that's not the point of the deal we've just done with the Chinese. That was, we have a shareholder who's the largest player in China, the largest player in the world, and both of us have a reason to team together. And that's why we're there. And what happens in Australia will happen in Australia. We're not in control of that.
Yeah, no, fantastic. All right, look, I think we might pull stumps there. Thanks again for doing this. Thanks to the shareholders for looking at this video again. And as I keep saying, they know how to contact me.
I'm looking forward to the next one, Tony.
All right, absolutely. We all are.
I'm looking forward to the next one.
All right, thanks, Justyn.
Okay, see you guys. Thanks.
See ya.